Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another Green Box Politics Classic. And I'm your host, Blackbeard Mirage. So for this afternoon's lesson, I want to take you on a journey where you will learn about the story of a young man by the name of Larry Bishop. So this afternoon's classic, I want to take you on a journey where we will go through the story of a young man that I grew up with on the south side of Atlanta by the name of Larry Bishop. The purpose and objective of this production is to provide enlightenment for those that may have been around back then during those times and may have wondered what exactly happened with Larry. And it is also for educational and inspirational purposes for those that may have not known Larry and you were not around back then. So I don't want you to view this as entertainment. I want you to view this as educational purposes. If you don't know anybody involved in this situation, but if you were around and you do know the people involved, I want this to provide some type of enlightenment for you. Okay. Before I move forward, I also want to, give a disclaimer that, me talking about this story, I don't intend to offend anyone. I don't intend to open up old scabs and old wounds and recreate old beefs and things that people have moved on from and grown and matured from. The whole purpose of this is, as I said, to provide enlightenment for educational purposes and also for the brother Larry Bishop's spirit and his story to be told with the truth. Because as far as my knowledge is, this is the first time that it may be explicitly told this way. Okay. So this is going to be a long journey, a long ride, and I want to put this in more of a cinematic story form. So just sit back, maybe grab you something to drink or some type of refreshment and tune in and concentrate on my words. All right. So in order to understand Larry's story, there is a lot of background information that I must give you concerning, various people, the area of Atlanta that the situation happened, the neighborhoods, the street crews, etc. So there are going to be a lot of names that's going to come up in this as far as, areas of the South Side. And when it comes to people that were involved in this, some of the names I will use people's real name. Others I will leave their names out. And for those that, I think maybe a code name should be used, I'll use a code name for them. All right. So to go into this video, what we first must do is provide an introductory background to the neighborhood that I grew up in, okay? And the relationship that we had in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So around 1997, on the south side of Atlanta in Riverdale, you already had a lot of communities and neighborhoods and certain streets that had older homes. But in the late 90s, early 2000s, in certain parts of Riverdale, developers would come in and create new homes that may have been in pre-existing neighborhoods. So you may have had a neighborhood where there were older duplexes and older homes, but there may have been a couple of streets that were new homes built in this neighborhood. The neighborhood that I grew up in, which is called Palisades on Taylor Road, it happened to be one of these neighborhoods. And it was a neighborhood that included duplexes. It had older homes, but it also had about 2 or 3 streets with brand new homes on them. So the people that lived in them, they were the first people to live in these homes. And in the late 90s, my mother purchased one of these homes. So prior to moving to Palisades, which is on Taylor Road on the south side in Riverdale, I grew up and lived on Valley Hill at Stratford Arms, which was by the Riverdale Library. And I also grew up on Upper Riverdale Road, which was connected to Stratford Arms. And Taylor Road actually was right down the street. So this is all in the same area, Valley Hill, Upper Riverdale Road, Taylor Road. I basically just moved down the street in the late 90s. And when I moved to this neighborhood, there were a lot of, young men that were in the neighborhood. Some of them, majority of them were older than me, but they were all around my age. We could say, between that range of maybe 1 to 3 to 4 years older. In other words, we were all in middle school, elementary, and high school around the same time. Some of the older guys had aged out of high school by the time I got ready to go to high school, but nevertheless, this is everybody that we grew up with. And it was a lot of people. You know, it was brothers living in the neighborhood who had older cousins, older brothers, and they were associated with people with other neighborhoods. So there was a large group of people that were from that original crew in Palisades. And we were very, very close to each other. Also, too, connected to Palisades on Taylor Road, behind our neighborhood, you had a greater community or a greater neighborhood that had a lot of streets, but the homes back here were a little older. So these people were already established in this back neighborhood connected to Palisades. And some of the streets were Attleboro, Dun Ellen, Essex Drive, Nicole Court, Queens Drive, Darwin Drive, Debbie Lane, Tudor Drive, Devon Drive. And this will lead you all the way up to Kendrick Road and all the way up to Flint River. And when you would get to basically the part where you would enter Flint River, leaving from behind our neighborhood, there were 2 BP gas stations on the corner. There was one on the left and one on the right-hand side. So connected to our neighborhood was Flint River, Kendrick Road, Taylor Road, and all those other streets and all those other, we could say like many neighborhoods and many communities that was connected to it. Now, mind you all, this was a lot of young people that were connected to this at one time. And these were all the people we were growing up with. Larry actually lived by the BPs closer to Flint River. Okay, so Larry was from more over by the BPs in Flint River. The original crew in Palisades, we grew up, you know what I'm saying, doing a variety of things, and we were known for a variety of things. But one of the particular things was sports, athletics, street basketball, recreational basketball, AAU basketball, playing for the middle school, playing for the high school. This was something, you know, very, very popular in my neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Because growing up in the streets, it don't take much to play basketball. All you need is a basketball, a goal, you know, and some open space. So that was something we did, and we used it as a way to, you know, train each other, to challenge each other. And there were a lot of battles we would have on the basketball court. Even from my neighborhood, you had a brother named Mike Sloan. He was a couple of years older than me, but he went to Lovejoy High School, and he was basically one of the top athletes and top basketball players in the entire Clayton County. So anybody that was around back then in those early 2000s, especially if you were playing basketball or if you was just in the streets playing basketball, you may have known about Mike Sloan, okay? Because Mike Sloan, after he graduated from Lovejoy, he ended up going to Clayton State. And he was also a star basketball player there. And a couple of his cousins lived in my neighborhood. So, you know, Mike Sloan was always in our neighborhood. And he was one of the people, too, that played ball with us. You know, so we would go from different neighborhoods around the south side, particularly in our area, you know, on Taylor Road, Kendrick Road, down by Point South, Flint River. And we would play against other neighborhoods. We would have like 3-on-3 tournaments, 4-on-4 tournaments. And we was dominating people, basically, you know. So that was, you know, one of the fun activities that we would do growing up. And this is like the greater crew of people that Larry would end up getting close to and running with in the streets. OK, so I just wanted to kind of give you that background of, you know, the original Palisades crew from Taylor Road, some of the adjacent hoods that we were connected to in the back neighborhood that connected on down to Kendrick Road and Flint River. And this was all from about, let's say, 1997 till about 2003, okay? So the era that I just gave you was about 1997, 2003, and this is like the foundation that Larry was going to be introduced to, okay? So the next thing I want to talk about now is about, now we're looking at the time period of about the summer of 2003, the fall of 2003, when I was transitioning out of middle school at Point South. And now I'm graduating and getting ready to go to the 9th grade, okay? So although we were from Riverdale and we lived on Taylor Road, Riverdale Middle School and Riverdale High School actually was right down the street from me. It's right down the street from Taylor Road. But for jurisdiction reasons, they rezoned us. So when it came to middle school, a lot of us went to Kendrick Middle School. Some of us went to Point South Middle School. And when it got ready to go to high school, some of us went to Jonesboro High School. Some of us went to Riverdale High School. And some of us went to Mundy's Mill High School, okay? So when I started going to Mundy's Mill High School in my 9th grade year, this is when I initially remember meeting Larry. Okay, this is when I first had my, initial encounter with Larry. And when Larry started to come to Palisades. So Larry was introduced into our life in about the late summer, fall of 2003. I really remember him coming around in my freshman year. All right. When I was about 13, 14 years old. Okay. And this is when Larry would come around. Now, as far as how did Larry get introduced to us, someone that I grew up with in Palisades who stayed on Mountain Pass, it was one of the streets in Palisades, and he was my neighbor. He was a couple of years older than me. And there was a guy that he was cool with, and we're going to call this guy Curtis, okay? So the neighbor that I grew up with, who was from that original Palisades crew, he was cool with a dude named Curtis who wasn't from our neighborhood. And Curtis started to come to Palisades and Taylor Road and hang out with the brother that I grew up with. And by default, if you're hanging out with somebody that I grew up with and the rest of the crew, then we're going to learn who you are, and then you're going to start hanging out with that greater crew. So now Curtis is starting to come to Palisades, and he's hanging out with the crew. And with Curtis, Larry comes, because Curtis and Larry already have a prior relationship before they start coming to Palisades and dealing with that original crew in Palisades. So Curtis and Larry, they're already cool. They already been knowing each other for a little bit of time. And then these guys are older than me. Larry was about 3 years older than me, and Curtis is probably about the same age. So, these guys was older, and they were already in, a little more advanced in certain stuff, just doing things that older guys will probably be doing. Because me, I'm still 13, 14 years old. These guys, they already, 17, getting ready to be 18 years old, going into like their junior, senior year, getting ready to go out of high school. Whereas with me, I'm just now coming into high school. So by the time I met Larry, he was already done with majority of his high school career, and he was going to get ready to graduate and move on. So another thing that made me create a connection with Larry was that Larry was also cool with another person that I grew up with and I was close to, and we're going to call this person Jumper Cables. Okay, we're going to call this person Jumper Cables. So Larry was cool with this guy that I grew up with named Jumper Cables. And because Larry and Jumper Cables were close, I naturally began to be around Larry a lot more. So now I'm starting to grow my own relationship with Larry one-on-one because he's around Jumper Cables. All right. And me and Jumper Cables already had a prior relationship, and we were cool. So now I'm around Larry more. I'm able to see his demeanor, his temperament, evaluate his personality, etc. I can remember when Larry first came to our neighborhood, at least the first memory I have, we was on Mountain Pass at one of the brothers' house in the front yard, because sometimes it was different areas we would hang out. There was a green box in front of my house, and a lot of brothers, we would sit on the green box and hang out there. And we would also hang out at one of the guys' house who stayed on Mountain Pass down the street from me in front of his home. So it was one night, we were just all out there deep as hell, kicking it, talking shit, roasting, doing what we usually do. And I can remember Curtis came over and he introduced us to Larry. And I can remember just thinking like, damn, who this dude is, you know what I'm saying? Because Larry was real quiet. You got to remember that original Palisades crew was a lot of people. And then when you talk about everybody's cousins and, brothers and everybody that was connected to it, you talking about 20, 30, 40, 50 people probably, and really more than that. So when Larry came over, he's seeing all these dudes in Palisades, and he's noticing we already got a connection with each other. So I remember him initially just being kind of quiet, just trying to get a feel for everybody. And one of the early things I can remember about Larry was that he smiled a lot. All right. So a little bit of background on Larry. Larry had a real laid back type of demeanor. You know what I'm saying? He was always fresh. Always had the latest Jordans, the latest Nikes, the latest throwback jerseys, And Larry also had a platinum grill. He was one of the first older brothers that was around that I remember having a platinum grill, like you see him with in this picture. And Larry was always smiling, you know what I'm saying? Always shining. And you always saw that platinum grill. And Larry had his own style. He was never the type of nigga that was, copying somebody else, because he was a little bit older. So his personality was developed. And he had a sense of knowing who he was, and he was secure. Larry's family was from Washington, D.C., okay? So by the time we met him, he was already living on the South Side, but he still had family and stuff in D.C. So we would call him DC sometimes, to kind of connect back to his home up in Washington. And, and Larry also had the women, you know what I'm saying? Like in high school, I mean, he was a ladies' man. He ain't had no problem with the women at all. He was liked by a lot of people. He had a likable type of personality. You know what I'm saying? And then Larry was also loyal. He was with all the action and all the smoke. So that was my, first initial encounter with Larry and my first introduction to him. Now, what I want to do now is kind of give you all a couple of funny memories that I had with Larry, just to show like how much we were around him and some of the things that stood out to me. I can remember one time when, because, growing up, you know what I'm saying, we all coming from the so-called black community, and our households, it's not like everybody's, rolling in dough and got a whole bunch of money and finance. And there would be times where maybe we were going back to school for the first day, or maybe we were coming back from Christmas break or something like that. And, a lot of brothers may have not been able to get no new pair of clothes or new pairs of shoes. So a lot of the things that we would do, too, is just to make sure that the brothers was fresh. We would make sure that the next homie got something nice to wear. You know what I'm saying? Or if you had a pair of shoes or something like that, but you didn't have no jeans or a T-shirt to match it, it was nothing for one of the bros to give you something to wear, because that's how we were. It was like a real brotherhood. Like, Lil Wayne said and the Birdman Jr. said, he said, "What up, Jizzle, you my distant brother. Real shit, nigga, same father, different mother." Like, that's how our relationship was. So I remember one time Larry had some navy blue Jabot jeans. They was hard. And I remember, I'm like, damn, bro. I'm like, man, let me borrow them Jabots or whatever. He's like, all right, bet, I got you. So he let me borrow the Jabots. You know what I'm saying? I'm fresh. I'm doing my thing, right? So then one day Larry called me. He was like, man, I'm about to come get the Jabots or whatever. I'm like, all right, I'm at the house. Come on. So I'm at the house just chilling. You know what I'm saying? So then Larry, he pulls up. So then he come in for a minute. We talking and stuff. And I give him the Jabots, right? But in the kitchen that morning after my mother had cooked breakfast, sometimes we would leave, certain food on the stove. Like if me and my brother were lazy and we just didn't put everything up. And this particular afternoon, it was some of the biscuits that were remaining from breakfast that morning, right? So I remember when me and Larry was talking, he saw those biscuits on the stove, and I guess he was real hungry. He's like, damn, bro. He's like, man, let me get some of them biscuits or whatever. And I'm like, bro, them biscuits from this morning. I'm like, you want them? He was like, hell yeah, whatever, da-da-da-da. And I remember just kind of joking with him and roasting him and laughing. Like, I'm like, man, your ass hungry or whatever, da-da-da-da. So he ended up laughing with me. We just kind of joking and playing around. And then eventually he left. You know what I'm saying? So that was like a real funny memory I had. Another funny memory I had with Larry was that when I was in, I had a PE class, but what I'm saying, the young Blackbeard was always fly. So a lot of the older girls who were more developed, they were a little more mature. Their breasts were bigger. They was thicker. Their behinds was bigger. You know what I'm saying? When I was like 13, 14, I was drooling over them. You know what I'm saying? So, and Larry was one of those older guys that he had the women. So one of the women he had that he was dealing with, I remember she was in my PE class, and it was funny because every time she was in there, man, like if I was playing basketball or something like that, I was trying to destroy anybody that was around, really just low key trying to impress her. You know what I'm saying? And I remember I would joke with Larry about it a lot. I remember he used to be like, boy, you need to leave my girl alone or whatever and shit like that. And I remember just kind of fucking with him about that and him getting on me and shit, really like some younger brother, older brother type shit. You know how your older brother may have a girlfriend or something that's fine as hell, and you the younger brother and you trying to, you know what I'm saying, fake like you gonna steal his girl and little shit like that. I remember me and him had that going on or whatever. And that was kind of just a little, a little funny thing. If I can remember correctly, this girl, she had a truck. Because remember, these folks was older than me, so they already was having cars and stuff like that. And I remember she had a truck. And I remember one time she gave us a ride and dropped us off in the neighborhood. But that was another little funny memory I had. And another memory that stand out, man, was one afternoon, me and the guys had got done playing basketball. Larry ain't really used to hoot with us like that too much. You know what I'm saying? Larry was kind of more like the fly guy. He would kind of just be on the sideline talking shit or, engaging in something else when we was on the court going ham. But I remember we got done playing basketball, and I remember we was thirsty as hell. You know what I'm saying? And nobody really had no money. So I was like, man, I'm finna go to the BP and buck. You know what I'm saying? And just go steal some shit, right? So I remember me and a couple of the guys went to one of the BPs on Flint River. So I'm in there, mind you, I ain't got no book bag. I had on like some basketball shorts. And it was like during like the fall time. So it wasn't cold to where we got on coats and shit and hoodies. But we was deep, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, man, I ain't gonna leave the bros out. So I got to get the bros something to drink too. So we was in there, and I remember this was around the same time that the Mountain Dew Cold Red came out. For all my people that go back to the early 2000s, you may remember that, those Cold Red Mountain Dew drinks. So I remember they had some Cold Red in there. So I was like, man, I'm finna get this Cold Red. So I remember taking the drinks, right? But see, back then we used to be so deep and just doing so much crazy stuff that, I was like, I don't even really give a fuck if these folks catch me or not. But nigga, I'm finna get these two. It was 2 liters I had. I remember I was trying to take them, right? So I'm taking them, and then one of them low-key fell out. So the dude behind the cash register, the Arab dude, he's looking. He's like, oh, you trying to steal? Are you trying to steal? And all this other stuff, right? So he's holding me in front of the cash register, basically just doing a bunch of yelling and acting like he gonna call the police and all this other stuff, right? So I'm sitting there just like, hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah, giving him a bunch of hell yeahs. But out the corner of my eye, I'm low-key looking at Larry like, man, what the fuck? So Larry was kind of by the door, and I remember Larry kind of cracked the door open, right? So when he did that, he kind of gave me a look. So I already knew what time it was. So I'm like, okay, my nigga gonna open the door. I'm finna dip. So the gas station clerk, he's just sitting there doing all this talking. I'm just looking at him like, hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. Then out of nowhere, I just pushed his ass and ran off and ran out the goddamn gas station of the BP. And then when I ran out, man, I was so, you know what I'm saying, cautious and didn't want to get caught to where my ass ended up literally running through the whole woods on Flint River. Like, I'm running through the woods of the back neighborhood. I'm not even taking the streets because I'm thinking the police gonna come down the street or something. So I take a cut by like Larry house because there was a bunch of woods and shit that kind of connected to Palisades that was on the front on Taylor Road. Man, I ran through that shit, man. I got cut up by so many vines and, cause remember now it's like it's adjacent to Flint River. So it's kind of muddy back there and shit. And I remember I got back to Palisades and Larry and some of the guys, they were just clowning and roasting me like, boy, your ass crazy. Like, you ran out that store, whatever, X, Y, and Z. And I remember Larry just found that shit to be funny as hell. But then were just like a couple of memories I had with him, man, where, we were just like young teenagers, man, doing regular shit in the streets, wilding out. So the next thing I want to do now is I want to transition to you into some of the conflicts that we were having, because this is where some of the story is going to kind of pick up a little bit. All right. So, pay attention. So now I want to give you a little bit of a background between this guy, Curtis, being bullied and tried in his own neighborhood. And he was being bullied and tried and, antagonized by guys who were from further down Flint River. And they were connected to people that were from like Homewood, Point South, Thomas Road, and T Road, right? So Homewood was basically like an area, and it was like a main road, and it was down the street from Taylor Road. But along Homewood, it was like a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of houses, and it would lead all the way down to Fairway Point, which was like a popular apartment complex back during this time. So these guys was like kind of down the street from us on Flint River, but we didn't really frequent that area too much. And then, of course, you had Point South Apartments, which was down the street on Point South Parkway and down by Point South Middle School. And then, of course, you had T Road or Thomas Road, which was like a main road, and it had multiple neighborhoods. Now, mind you, when I was in middle school, a lot of these guys, I was from Homewood, Point South, and T Road. Before a lot of the beef and the conflict started and the violence, we actually were cool with these guys. Because remember, we all from the South Side. We all from that part of Riverdale. You know what I'm saying? All of us are probably going to Point South. A lot of us are from Flint River. So, later on, we will end up beefing with some of these dudes. But initially, we were cool with a couple of them. Okay. So now I want to give you more on this guy, Curtis, and some of his conflict. Because remember, this guy, Curtis, who was introduced to the Palisades Crew, he got his own neighborhood that he's coming from on Flint River. But the niggas in his neighborhood, he don't really get along with them. And these dudes are clowning him. They roasting them. They probably beating him up. And then they had their own little crew over there. And I think that they saw Curtis as a lame. So they ain't really deal with him like that, right? So once Curtis is introduced to the Palisades crew, this was probably the first time he had like a real powerful force of people behind him and like a major crew. You know what I'm saying? Because when I first met Curtis, I could tell he wasn't as seasoned with the gangsterism in the streets like we were in Palisades. Like, I can tell he wasn't really used to like fighting his homeboys and being trained in gladiator school because, you know, it was certain little conflicts that he wasn't really able to respond the right way to. And his homeboy and the homeboy that I grew up with on Mountain Pass that introduced Curtis to us, this homeboy was he was like a neutral type of homeboy. And then he was a type of homeboy that was empathetic. You know what I'm saying? So if Curtis was getting picked on and beat up or whatever, you know, he gonna stand up for him. And because he grew up with us in Palisades, we're gonna stand up and protect him. We ain't gonna let nothing happen to him. So by default, Curtis starts to be protected by us because one of our homeboys takes him in. Okay. So what happens is that when Curtis starts to see this powerful military that he really got behind him, this street military, his behavior changed. You know, he started acting way more courageous, and he started doing a lot of low-key bragging about the niggas he connected to and how he can get the niggas he's beefing with mobbed on and stepped on and all type of stuff like that. So remember now, Curtis and Larry, they already cool, but they ain't really connected to no major street crew like us. So they ain't really have the force to go against these guys like that. Now, Larry wasn't getting picked on. You know what I'm saying? Didn't nobody really bother Larry like that. Like, bro had his own style, and he carried himself in a certain type of way, and then people had a casual respect for him. So I don't remember Larry having no initial conflict with any of these people. You know, unfortunately, it was this dude, Curtis, all right? So Larry and Curtis are cool. So Larry not going to let nobody bother Curtis. So now you can kind of see how everybody's getting behind Curtis. Larry behind Curtis, and then you got the Palisades crew behind Curtis, okay? So now what begins to happen is that, you know, based on my neighbor's face card, you know, from Mountain Pass and Palisades, our entire force begins to back Curtis up. So now these dudes that were in the opposition that were from Curtis's neighborhood that lived on Flint River, and they was connected to like Homewood and Point South and T Road and Fairway Point and all that. Now that other rival crew, they starting to see like, oh shit, Curtis connected to them niggas over on Taylor Road. And like I told you all prior, like we was already known, you know what I'm saying, for a variety of things. Because not everybody in the neighborhood was strictly on playing basketball. Like I know I was, you know what I'm saying? And I would get into the fights and stuff like that. But you had other homeboys that, you know, they may have just been strictly fighting and stuff like that. For example, like one of them was Amin. Y'all know about Amin, the street celebrity from Pakistan and New Jerusalem. Amin also grew up with us in Palisades on Taylor Road. And Amin would also play basketball in the streets with us too. But Amin was like, you know what I'm saying? He was the type of nigga that wasn't taking no shit. He was always looking for the smoke. So even if it was like a slick conflict, Amin was looking to get on your head. So this is the force now that is behind Curtis and, you know, and providing him protection, really. Okay. So now continuing on the background to these conflicts, by now everyone on our side has consolidated under one umbrella. And some of the homies called this new one umbrella or this new identity that we will all go up under, they called it Amp Squad. All right. Now, Amp Squad originates back to the late 90s, early 2000s, where a lot of the original crew in Palisades would make music. All right. So it stems back to the music activities of Amin and other original Palisades members. OK, so in like the early 2000s, like even when I was in middle school, I can remember going over Amin's house and him already, you know, trying to figure out how to record music and making beats and coming up with lyrics and hooks. And I mean, if I was 12 years old, Amin was 11. So this was when we were very, very young. And then Amin, his family was from the west side of Atlanta. OK, they were from off of like MLK, Ashby, Egan Homes, you know what I'm saying, other parts of the city of Atlanta. And then he had an older uncle, too, who was running the streets, who was about 7-8 years older than us. So when it came to a lot of like the popular street culture, a lot of the popular stuff that was going on in the city of Atlanta, you know, some of the top music that was going on, I mean's uncle would keep him aware of it, and then I mean would bring that culture back to Palisades. So there was a lot of times when me and I mean would be at his house really making music and stuff like that. All right. So that was really where Amp Squad had its foundation. And I can remember during my 9th grade year that I mean and some of the Palisades brothers, they actually performed at the Sparkle skating rink that was on Highway 85. All right. And everyone at school even knew about it, even our school principal, all right, who was actually now the superintendent of Clayton County, Mr. Smith, okay? So at first, before all the drama, everyone at Mondays Mill High School was showing us love because we were known for a variety of things. You had brothers in the crew that was able to get the women. You had brothers in the crew that was playing for the school basketball team and stuff like that. So, you know what I'm saying, at first, everything was cool. Another thing is that the Palisades Amp Squad crew also was tied in with Southside Mafia in 220, okay? One of the original Palisades members, who was from Sandpiper Glen, which was one of the other streets over in Palisades, he had an older brother who was the top war general, one of the top war generals in Southside Mafia, and his name was AB, all right? So I want to just give a rest in peace and rest in power to the brother AB. I'm sure in a future tape, I'll do one specifically for him because he deserves his own green box politics. But when AB got out of prison, he made the connection official with Southside Mafia because remember, AB was going to, Riverdale High School. So a lot of the older Southside Mafia dudes, he met them up there and they was already running the streets with, and doing certain stuff. Okay. Now, when it came to 220, I first really got cool with 220 from Amin because Amin was cool with them and basically had left the neighborhood and went up and started building other relationships with other street crews and other parts of Riverdale. He even went and got to fighting with a bunch of people in 220 just to show them like that we're not playing no games and we standing on business. And from that, they respected him and the brotherhood came from that. So now Amin starts to bring 220 over to our neighborhood. And this is when I first met the brother N.O. You know what I'm saying? So I want to say free and no, you know what I'm saying? Real Tudor war general. Anybody that was in the streets back then, and no, you've heard his name. So this is when I first started meeting and no, because they would come over to Palisades and you know what I'm saying? We would all just kick it and hang out. Sometimes we would be down in Amin's house, like in his driveway or the garage. Sometimes we would be over on Sandpiper Glen at AB's house and his younger brother in the basement kicking it, or sometimes we would be on the green box in front of my house. So this is when I started kind of learning who 220 was and building my own relationship with them. And no, he was like one of the main guys and he was always with Amin. So, that's how me and No got a little closer. So Southside Mafia in 220, they were from like Taylor Road, upper parts of Taylor Road, Upper Riverdale Road, 85, Valley Hill. They were from up by Riverdale Middle School and Riverdale High School. And they were from many other areas on the south side and the entire Clayton County. So, you know what I'm saying? The Southside Mafia in 220, like, these niggas was mobbing. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Mafia and the Dub, they were already thugging and on real gangster shit before we were in Palisades. You know what I'm saying? So, some of these guys, they were a little bit older. They were already smoking weed. They was already drinking. They was already having straps and tools. They was already robbing niggas. They was already shooting niggas, and they was about all the action and all the smoke. And they were notoriously feared on the south side and already had a history of conflicts with Hit Squad Taliban. And Hit Squad Taliban, they were from like College Park, North Clayton, Main Street, College Park Projects, Godby Road, Old National, and that whole like College Park area and like the northern part of Clayton County and the northern part of Riverdale. That was like their area, okay? So 220 and Southside Mafia, they had already been beefing with Hit Squad really before we got into certain things in the streets, all right? So behind Curtis and Larry, now you see this powerful terrorizing street crew. You got Palisades Amp Squad, you got Southside Mafia, and you got 220, and we all together. And this when we start, niggas start shouting out Amp to the Mafia. Just like I mean saying the song, nigga, Amp to the Mafia beat the dreads off you. Amp to the Mafia leave you dead in the coffin. Like, niggas was on that back then. You know what I'm saying? Just going around the south side, raising hell. I mean, there was even times too where we would go to the east side of Atlanta and go over to the Megaplex and fight against some of the street crews on the east side. So this was like, we pretty much was like the biggest, I guess you could say for around that area. And then Southside Mafia, they was into making music as too. Like when I talked about B Smeezy, because B Smeezy used to be in our neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? And we would kick it with them on different parts of Terra Boulevard and stuff like that. Like we was always in each other's neighborhoods and hanging out, right? And Larry was around with all this. So Larry was meeting the 220 guys. Larry was meeting the Southside Mafia guys. And then remember, Larry is a little bit older than me. So he's created his own relationships, even outside of what I know is going on, right? So one day, Curtis makes us aware of a problem that he's having with these same guys that's from his neighborhood that was, jumping them and I guess beating them up and picking on them, right? So when becomes aware of this, Larry, and a couple of the Palisades crew began to start riding these guys' school bus to avenge Curtis. Another person that was with them who was from over on Kendrick Road, that was from our crew, is a brother named Tony. You know what I'm saying? And the brother Tony, salute to him, real brother, loyal, always standing on business, was fearless, and was about all the smoke and all the action, and he embraced us and we embraced him, and we love Tony. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, Tony has been in the Georgia State Prison for 10 plus years because of, some little situations that he had. But during this time period, and Tony, they was running, and yeah, they really had a lot of niggas like scared of them. You're just being all the way honest with you. So and Tony, man, they ride Curtis bus, right? And a lot of the Palisades Amp Squad crew, led by they began terrorizing these dudes who were beating up Curtis. Okay. Now everybody from Palisades weren't going over there. It was just a couple of the guys. And they were just going over there, just terrorizing these dudes, man. So just imagine riding somebody's school bus and getting off on their bus stop and basically just beating these niggas asleep. And that's really what, we was doing. Just like, in song, the Larry song, he say, we used to ride a nigga bus after school just to beat him up. Like that's real. You know what I'm saying? That's real. I'm kind of giving you a little bit of the background of that. But this is what was going on. I can remember one of the dudes that they ended up beating up because Larry was with him, you know what I'm saying? And they all got revenge, for Curtis. So, of course, this going to boost Curtis's confidence up, right? So he starts bragging a little bit more, and then and Tony, they just looking for smoke anyway. So it kind of just, it ended up being favorable for Curtis because he just had some real monsters with him, honestly. So what happened was, man, one of the dudes that they beat up, because a lot of the times, sometimes I would be there, but then I would have like basketball practice or, some other shit going on. So sometimes I would be there and sometimes I wasn't. But if I wasn't there, they would always let me know what happened when I got back to the neighborhood or whatever the case may be. But I remember even when I caught wind of one of the dudes that was bothering Curtis and shit like that they was fighting, this dude was in my PE class. So then I started putting pressure on him, you know what I'm saying, in PE. And bro didn't really want no smoke with me. And I can remember just to kind of get at him, I remember he had some Air Jordan Retro 9s. They was the all gray ones with the white on them. And I remember I stole his shoes and gave them to my little brother just to terrorize him. You know what I'm saying? Because that's low-key what we was doing back then, So one of these dudes that, was getting beat up now, that's starting to notice like, oh shit, these Amp Squad, these niggas starting to come over here now. And Curtis got people behind him that are a real threat. So now they starting to call they older brothers and other people from the area so they can go against the Palisades Amp Squad crew, right? And, as time went on, this eventually led to us having issues with folks from Homewood, T-Road, Point South, some of those surrounding areas. And then that little part of Flint River they were from. Now we starting to have more beefs and conflicts with them, and stuff is starting to get a little bit more serious now, okay? So now I want to transition you to, understanding also like Larry was around all this stuff now. So remember that, Larry is part of the Palisades Amp Squad crew. Everybody's beef is each other's beef. So, and then remember, Larry was there to defend his boy Curtis. Remember, Curtis and Larry already have been cool before they even met the Palisades crew. So Larry is there standing on business for Curtis and really anybody else. All right. And as I said, a lot of us that are from the Palisades original crew, We used to have good relationships from folks that was from Point South and T Road and some of them surrounding areas, but once these conflicts with Curtis started, you know what I'm saying? A lot of that started to end. So we weren't really dealing with them and talking to them like that no more. All right. And this started to create certain divisions on the South Side, you know, in our area, you know, and a lot of people started choosing sides. I can remember one time where, also before I say this, you got to remember now, Larry is a little bit, he's like 3 years older than me. So Larry already got his own relationships with people he knows. And then Larry was from over by Kendrick, you know, by Flint River and the BPs. So he knew niggas that was from Homewood and some of these neighborhoods around, and probably already had friendships with them before all these beefs started. So I remember a time where, you know, Larry was still kind of dapping up some of these people. And Jumper Cables, he caught wind of it. And I remember he was giving Larry a lot of pressure. And, you know, he was checking Larry about it. Like, man, you still dapping these niggas up or whatever. You don't see when these beef with these folks, X, Y, and Z. And I remember some of the brothers in Palisades looking at Larry like, damn, like, what the hell are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like nigga, we in the midst with this shit, you know? So by now, you know, we having conflicts all the time with this rival street crew that was coming from, you know, certain parts of Flint River on down to Homewood and Point South, right? So we got to continue now with these conflicts because I'm taking you down this journey and road to where, you know, it'll all make sense in the end. So another key conflict that happened was one of the original Palisades members. He got into a fight in school with a guy that was on the football team in PE. And this guy that he got into a fight with in school, he was connected to some of them dudes that was in Hit Squad Taliban, okay? I can remember one time we were in PE and I was on the track upstairs walking around, and on the basketball court, you know, one of the brothers I grew up with in Palisades, he actually was somebody that I had a lot of respect for when it came to basketball, and I learned a lot of discipline from him. And he took basketball real serious, and he was the type of homeboy that, you know, he gonna always have the last word. Like, you know what I'm saying? He don't really just back down too easily. Like, I mean, I done even fought bruh a couple of times, you know, on some just older brother fighting a younger brother type shit. But that's just how his personality was. So in PE, him and one of the football team dudes kind of got in a little argument, and then my brother basically just swung on dude. You know what I'm saying? And got the best of him in school, okay? And then I remember they ended up getting suspended from school, right? So what ended up happening after this was, it was in May. We was at Amin's house for his sister's birthday party. So we all just kicking in and hanging out. And after the birthday party was over, we was like, man, let's go, you know what I'm saying, to the back neighborhood and play basketball right over one of the guys' spot. So we in the back neighborhood playing basketball and shit. Then out of nowhere, we see these cars pulling up and we see this silver Crown Vic. And then all these niggas get out the car and I see the dudes in the football team that my nigga had just gotten a fight with, right? So, you know what I'm saying? They come up or whatever, and then he asking, he want a one-on-one and all this shit. And, you know what I'm saying? They really had caught us off guard. We had just got done partying and we was in a good mood. You know, we were kind of tired from playing basketball. So, you know what I'm saying? That shit was like, it was just a negative energy. So, you know, my boy and the football team dude, they end up getting in a fight or whatever. And then one of them niggas had a gun on him and he pulled the gun out. You know what I'm saying? Acting like he was going to shoot somebody. So one of my niggas was like, nigga, bust in. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's scared of that shit. We got tools too. Here you saying? So at that moment, that's when I caught wind of these two niggas in this Crown Vic. And I noticed that these dudes was serious. You know what I'm saying? And they were like the muscle that these guys who was beefing with was calling. Because they started noticing like these Palisades dudes are a little too much. They connected to Southside Mafia. They connected to 220. And the football team, some of them had relationships with these hit squad guys. And some of the guys that was from that Homewood, T-Road, Point South area, they had relationships with hit squad too. Now, you got to remember that 220 and Southside Mafia are already beefing with hit squad. So it was nothing for everybody to kind of click up the way that they did, right? So what happens now is that, you know, more conflicts come. Another weird ass situation was this. So remember, I'm telling you, like me and a couple of the brothers in Palisades, we played AAU basketball, right? And my homie that fought against the football team dude in school, he played on the older AAU team. Because you know how AAU has like 14 and under or 15 and under. And then they'll have like the 16 and up or 17 and up, right? So my older homeboy, he played on the older team. But tell me why that when it came to our AAU team, on the older team, the two his squad dudes that we were starting to beef with, they play on the same basketball team. So imagine that kind of awkward shit. Imagine you playing on a team basketball team, but your teammates are part of rival street crews that you in the street beefing with. And then one of the his squad dudes, his father actually was the coach. So this created a real awkward situation. So I remember one time, my mother, she would take us to basketball practice. And this Saturday evening, I remember she told us she was going to be a little late because she had a wedding to go to, right? And I'll never forget, man, during basketball practice, I just had this weird feeling, man, because I was seeing a bunch of older niggas that was not on the basketball team, and they were just like hanging around. And then also, too, where we had basketball practice, it was at North Clayton Middle School in northern Riverdale, north part of, Clayton County. This is in his squad territory. So we not in our part of Riverdale, we in they part. So we got AAU practice in the enemy territory. And then my mother telling me that she gonna be late picking us up from practice. So I was like, man, this shit don't sound good. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, long story short, man, them niggas caught us slipping after practice. They waited for the coaches to leave and stuff like that. Then they faked like they were gonna leave. And then them niggas pulled back around. And long story short, man, they caught us slipping. So these beefs and the conflicts and fights and catching people slipping, either us catching them or them catching us, this shit happening like every other day. You know what I'm saying? This is just what's going on now. And we talking about, basically we in like 2005 now. Okay, we in like January, February, March of 2005. Okay. I can also remember another conflict where Curtis ended up fighting one of the dudes who was in a rival crew, and Amin was there as well. So Amin was like, well, shit, I'm finna fight one of these niggas, right? So the rival crew, they had a young guy. They was like, nah, you finna fight our young nigga. Because me, Amin, Tony, and a couple other people, like we was like the youngest in our crew. So the young guy in their crew, they had him come fight Amin. Now, this dude is a dude by the name of Paint. You know what I'm saying? And Paint, more than likely, he'll get his own green box politics because he's a notorious Southside figure as well, because later on in his life, he would end up dome checking somebody, basically standing over him and shooting him in the head and killing him. And right now, Paint got a life sentence. So he was like a real gangster. You know what I'm saying? Like, he really was that, So, man, I remember one time when I was at the house, you know what I'm saying? This was the time I wasn't there. And he came over and I remember his lip was bleeding. I'm like, bro, what the hell happened? He was like, man, we just got to fight with them niggas X, Y, and Z. He was like, man, some young light-skinned nigga came out or whatever, some dirty-looking T.I. nigga. And he was like, we got to fighting and whatever. So I tried to slam the nigga. The nigga bit me on my lip. I'm like, damn, the nigga bit you? He was like, yeah. So that's when I knew, like, yeah, this young nigga crazy. You know what I'm saying? Whoever he is, this Paint dude, right? And eventually I ended up seeing Paint on my own. And Paint also is actually the first person that ever pulled out a gun on me. Yeah, he pulled out a gun on me at South Lake Mall when we was outside of the food court. So Paint was serious, you know what I'm saying? He was about that shit for real. Another situation was during the spring break of 2005 where a lot of the T-Road, you had a crew of niggas called Dream Team that was from Lovejoy that was connected to them. The Homewood niggas, they came to our neighborhood in Palisades like 30, 40 deep with hit squad one day and caught us off guard. So these niggas done pulled up on Mountain Pass in front of my house, and it's like 40 of these niggas, right? So they pull up, and they got hit squad with them. So I'm seeing a bunch of niggas I don't know, and I'm seeing a couple niggas I do know. And this is when Southside Mafia and 220 got much more involved, and they began sliding, you know what I'm saying, on their own, like against these other crews on behalf of us. And Larry was also there when these niggas came over super deep. Like I can remember it like it was yesterday. I remember these niggas was in the streets and they was trying to walk and they was getting closer and closer to us. And I remember Larry, he was to my left on the sidewalk, and he had on a black tank top, some like gray sweatpants, and he had some black gloves on, like that black glove you see him wearing in this picture. And I remember Larry was swinging his bat, basically telling niggas like, "What's up, nigga? What's happening? Like, we can do this shit." Like, he was standing on business, even though we was severely outnumbered. Like, but we had to stand our guard because we was in front of my house and we was in front of the other homie house, so it wasn't like nowhere we could run, you know. And then it's like we in home territory, so it's like shit. Like, we gonna have to just see what the fuck happened. But what ended up going down was the older homie AB, he came running through the cut from Sandpiper. And when all the hit squad niggas saw him, so remember now, AB was one of the top Southside Mafia war generals. So when they saw AB, them niggas backed up. And I've never seen anything like that in my life. I've never seen damn near 30 to 40 niggas like back up and retreat just from one man. And I literally saw this with my own eyes, and I never forget it. That's when I knew, like, damn, this nigga AB on a whole nother level. Because obviously they knew that Southside Mafia was somewhere around if AB was there, which is true. And that was just another situation I remember happened. So I'm painting a picture now to show you, like, okay, these Palisades, Amp Squad, 220 Southside Mafia, they beefing hard with these Hit Squad, Taliban, Point South, Homewood, T-Road, you know what I'm saying, Flint River niggas, right? The beef is on and it's heating up, and Larry there in the mix of all of it. Larry with all the smoke, you know what I'm saying, everything, right? So now I want to take you to a part where shit really picked up, all right? So now the date I want to take you to is April 22nd, 2005. April 22nd of 2005, around the time of, let's say, between 1 and 1:30 p.m. So imagine where you were on April 22nd, 2005, between 1 and 1:30 p.m., right? So I'm going to give you a background story of what happened. So me and one of the guys, you know what I'm saying, we used to always eat lunch together, right? And when lunch was over, we would always get ready to go to fifth period. And a lot of times before we would get ready to go to class, you know, certain dudes that was in the opposite street crew, we would see them in the hallway. And, you know, and niggas would kind of talk shit back and forth and, you know what I'm saying, and then go to class. So, you know, you be walking down the hallway, you'll see the op or see the enemy. You be like, nigga, fuck your lame ass. Nigga, like, we gonna see you after school or whatever, or some shit like that. And then, you know, put your arm around a female or be holding a female hand and go to class. And, you know, some of the guys in our crew kind of had like a dark humor type of personality, and some of the guys in their crew did too. And usually those two would attract. Like, for example, I mean, used to always do it. Like, he used to always just talk shit to them and just be antagonizing them, basically, you know what I'm saying? And joking around, but also serious, like, type shit, you know? So that was going on, but the homie that I used to eat lunch with a lot, he wasn't really that type of person. He didn't have that personality to be joking with niggas that was on the outside. And I'm kind of the same way. Like, you know, I'm looking at it like, man, we beefing with these niggas. So I'm more so studying these niggas. Like, I don't want them niggas to know my moves. I don't want them to know really shit about me, but I want to know everything about them. And that's kind of how my homie was a little bit. So one of these dudes who I guess was used to playing around and had a dark humor that was on their side, he kind of was joking with my homeboy a little bit too much, right? So I'll never forget, me and the brother left, you know, lunch is over, we going to fifth period. I go in the bathroom, you know what I'm saying, to wash my face, wash my hands and stuff like that, right? When I come out the bathroom, the first thing I see to my left, and we had an assistant principal, his name was Mr. Colbert. By Mr. Colbert's office, I see a ring of people who kind of making like a circle, right? And in the circle of people that I see, it's all the enemy. You know what I'm saying? It's these football team niggas, and it's some of these rival street crews that's from the Homewood, T-Road, and all that, right? And in the middle of them, I see my homie that I eat lunch with all the time. I see him fighting against one of the opposition, right? But when I come out there, all I see is basically the enemy, and my homeboy was by himself. So the way I took that as is that, oh shit, you know what I'm saying? They trying to, you know, jump my guy because he was overwhelmed. He was by himself. So my initial animal instinct was to rush the situation. So basically I rushed the situation and knocked the dude out, right? But when I knocked the dude out, it created such a wild pandemic chaos. It was almost like You know when a nuclear bomb goes off and when the bomb explodes, but then you got that ripple effect where everything around it just burns up. That's pretty much what happened when I hit dude. Like when they were fighting, it just was two guys fighting. But when I came and the energy that I had and the mentality that I was in, it was such a dark, evil energy that it spread out throughout the school, basically. So I hit dude. And honestly, when I hit dude, I blacked out. You know what I'm saying? Because I was in such a rage that I wasn't even really conscious of what I did. So I remember I hit dude. And after I hit him, I can remember that one of the football team dudes, he kind of grabbed me to kind of like try to pull me off of him, I guess. And when he grabbed me and pulled me off of him, I can remember a couple of them dudes, you know, trying to stomp me and, you know, kick me and shit like that when I was down, right? And then after that, I remember the football team coach came and he kind of tried to break everything up. He asked me if I was okay, and then he put me in the office. While I'm sitting in the office and I can kind of come back to my consciousness and realize what I've done, I look down at my clothes and I see all this fucking blood. I'm talking about it was blood everywhere. Blood all on my t-shirt, my shorts, my shoes. I look in the hallway. I never forget, I saw the janitor. You remember how in school when somebody would throw up or it would be some kind of a hazardous bodily fluid, and it would be like this brown powder-like substance. And they would it was like a sandy powder-like brown substance. And they would put it on the throw up or the blood, and then they would wipe it up. And I'll never forget, I was seeing him put that on the floor, put the blood, put the little grainy dirt stuff on the blood, and he was mopping it up. And I remember everybody just looking in the principal's, you know, door, looking at me and pointing and saying, "Ooh," you know, just pointing and shit, like really looking at me like I'm this monster. You know what I'm saying? Because I got all this blood on me. They looking at me like I'm Michael Myers or something, right? And I didn't, and I was so lightheaded, I didn't even really realize what was going on because I had disassociated. I even remember what I had on that day. I had on like a sky blue t-shirt. I had on like some dark blue Anichi shorts. And I had on some white, navy blue, and powder blue Nike Huaraches, the one that Kobe Bryant was wearing in like 2004, 2005. I remember my mother got them for me. But after the fight, I mean, everything was just bloody. You know what I'm saying? My t-shirt, my shorts, my shoes, and my shoes was white. And I remember thinking like, damn, I done fucked my shoes up. So I'm in the office, right? And next thing I know is Mr. Smith, the principal, comes in there. And he says, "Chaz, what have you done?" And he just was screaming. You know what I'm saying? My real name is Chaz. He said, "Chaz, what have you done?" And he just was going off. You know what I'm saying? Like, then I was like, and I remember thinking in my head, like, damn, boy, I done fucked up. Like, this shit, what did I do? You know what I'm saying? It was almost like some werewolf. And then the next day when he turned back into a human man and he don't really know what he did. And that's the state I was in. You know what I'm saying? Because when you knee deep in the streets and everything is war mode, you know what I'm saying? And you on go time, like, sometimes you disassociate, and that's what had happened. But anyway, so after this, the dude that I knocked out, you know, I see him come in the office. This man lip damn near hanging off. He got blood all over him. His mother she came in there. She cursed me out talking about, "You cut my son and you did this and you did that." So I guess now, you know, people in the school, when they saw all the blood and stuff, they thought that I had a razor or a knife on me and I cut the guy. But the truth is that I really just hit him, and I only hit him one time. But it was just such power and force and anger that I had. It just knocked him out and it split his lip. It created a laceration on his lip. So, you know, from that point forward, a lot of chaos is created. You know what I'm saying? And shit is wild. Like, shit is wild. The homie that he was fighting ended up having to run out of the school because he already had a couple of priors in the juvenile system. And he had already been locked up. So he really couldn't get caught fighting in school. So when I came and hit dude and the chaos happened, I don't even think he knew I was coming. So he just ran out to school himself. So he didn't want to get in trouble. And I understood that later on. You know what I'm saying? I understood why he left. So, you know, the homie trying to like duck and stay out of trouble, because now Clayton County and Riverdale police, they swarming Palisades. I mean, they coming down Sandpiper Glen and Mountain Pass like, vroom, 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 vroom. I mean, there was a lot of them. And I just remember my dad just cussing me out and going off. And that was just really one of the craziest days of my life. That April 22nd, 2005, it was on a Friday. Just like today is September 22nd and it's on a Friday. So this happened on Friday. So now I'm going to transition you to April 23rd, 2005, which was that Saturday. And this is where things heat up with Larry's situation, okay? So now you already know that, okay, this Friday, you know what I'm saying, Blackbeard and his homeboy, you know, they done knocked this dude out, and now the street's going crazy. You know what I'm saying? Because there's rumors out there that he got cut, you know, and it just created a lot of fear and pandemonium. You know what I'm saying? So I know the opposition, the guys that was from the Point South, T Road, Homewood, you know, that probably weren't in school that day, when they got the information, and then when they saw how the dude looked, when his lip was hanging, they probably wanted, they was like, damn, these dudes really done went to the next level. So they felt like they had to up the ante. So now they riding around the streets, basically looking for us. You know what I'm saying? Riding up and down Taylor Road, you know, riding up and down Flint River. Now, while this is going on, remember now, I'm only 15 years old. You know what I'm saying? I'm 15. I'm a minor. So my parents had me on punishment. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't finna go outside. Nigga, it was over with. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm on lockdown, right? So that Saturday and Sunday, I'm at home. You know what I'm saying? Basically just trying to, you know, come to some kind of awareness of like, what did I do and what the fuck is really going on with my premature, you know, 15-year-old brain, right? So sometime during Saturday afternoon on April 23rd, Larry and one of his homeboys, who I think was from Homewood, who was neutral and he wasn't part of no gang affiliation. I think that Larry may have went to the BP gas station, because remember, Larry stayed right by Flint River. So when it came to like wanting to go get something to drink real quick or a bag of chips or something like that, Larry probably always just walked to the BP to grab something and go back home. Like, it was nothing because it was right by his spot. But during this time, remember that the streets are real hot from what we just did in school. So the enemy, they out and they out looking for anybody. You know what I'm saying? So Larry's at the BP gas station. Some of the enemy pulls up and they catch him slipping, right? And from what I'm told, you know, the enemy, some of them guys, they jumped Larry and they jumped his homeboy, right? So after they jumped Larry and his homeboy was neutral. He wasn't even involved in the streets. This put Larry in a rage, in a wrath, okay? Now, before I go deeper, there were plenty of times where I saw Larry use his firearm, because Larry had a strap. And Larry was not afraid to use it. You know what I'm saying? He'll shoot in the air and he'll shoot at a target too, you know? So after this happened, you know, Larry probably had his mind made up on what he wanted to do to retaliate. And understanding also that we were all young teenagers at the time, you know, the mind and the brain is not going to be as strategic and as methodical. You're going to more than likely be impulsive and go off of your emotional state. So if you're angry because some dudes just jumped you, you're going to make decisions and choices based off of that anger. You're not going to wait till you calm down and then make a rational choice of how you're going to get revenge. You're going to create a plan from you being in that state of anger, right? So that's what I think Larry did. So later on that day, I think Larry was boiling with, you know, rage, wrath, and he wanted revenge. And at some point, he contacts some of the guys in the crew, right? Now, while all this is going on, remember, the enemy got multiple cars riding around the south side looking for us. So a couple of these niggas done came in Palisades and they went by shooting by Amin's house. Okay? So all this was going on that Saturday after the fight we had in school on that Friday, okay? So now I'm going to transition you from April 23rd, 2005 daytime to April 23rd, 2005 the nighttime, okay? Now, for certain cliffhanger purposes, I'm going to leave out certain details in this. And it's not only for cliffhanger purposes, but also this information and these details, they'll come out in the right space and time that the Lord Most High want them to come out, okay? So this night, there was a house party going on down the street from Mondays Mill High School at a neighborhood, right? And Larry and some of the other crew, you know, they're made aware of this house party. So Larry and some of the other crew members say, hey, shit, we finna go by this house party, right? Now, this is what I think personally, but I don't think that Larry may have been aware that at this same time period, Southside Mafia and 220, they riding around and sliding and getting revenge for us as well. Because remember, they was already beefing with Hit Squad and stuff like that. So they was already doing stuff to get revenge and retaliate for us when little stuff happened for us. Okay? So Larry may have not been aware of this, or he may have, I don't know. But what ends up happening is that, some of the Mafia go and they slide on these dudes that's in the area of this house party, and they go by looking for them, okay? And after this happens, some of the rival crew who was at this house party and in this area, now they're cautious and they're alert because they just got into it with the Mafia. So they know the Amp Squad and the Dub, they're going to be somewhere around and the beef is on and this shit is hot right now. So these dudes are already alert and probably already got their guns drawn, waiting for something to happen or waiting for somebody to try to pull up, right? Once again, I'm telling you what I think because I was not there, all right? Remember, this is Saturday. Blackbeard is on punishment. You know what I'm saying? I ain't leaving the house, all right? So what ends up happening is that Larry and others arrive to the house party and Larry approaches to let off some shots to the enemy, right? Multiple rounds are fired from the opposition and Larry is hit multiple times. Okay? So what happens is that Larry arrives to this house party looking for the enemy. Larry is strapped up. Shots began firing off from both sides. But on the opposition side, they had multiple shooters with multiple firearms, one of them being an AK-47. Okay? And then Larry is hit multiple times, right? But Larry doesn't initially die, okay? While this is going on, there's a silver Crown Vic, that same Crown Vic that was with those Hit Squad dudes. And remember I told you that the guys that was on the older AAU team that were the rivals, some of these guys are there, okay? And you can know them by that Crown Vic in the tinted windows. So the Crown Vic pulls up and they try to shoot Curtis in the head. But instead of Curtis getting shot in the head, one of my other original crew members, he gets shot in the arm instead, right? So this is all going on that Saturday night. Larry ended up getting hit multiple times. And one of the brothers that I grew up with, he gets shot in the arm, okay? So now I want to transition you to April 24th, 2004, Sunday morning. So remember, mind you, I had fought at school that Friday. So that Saturday and Sunday, I was on punishment. I wasn't going anywhere. So I can remember it was around probably around 10 or 11 Sunday morning, April 24th. And I remember getting a phone call after I was, while I was eating breakfast with my family. And I remember I went downstairs to answer the phone and it was somebody from the crew. And long story short, he made me aware of what happened and that Larry had passed on. He made me aware of what happened Saturday. He gave me, he gave me his understanding of what happened. But the most crucial part of everything he told me was that Larry had passed on, man. And I'll never forget in that space and time, the awkward feeling I had, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't gonna lie to you, I just was crying in disbelief, just to be very, very honest with you. After he told me it, I was in kind of a disbelief and a shock. And I got off the phone with him and I just remember crying, you know what I'm saying? And then after that, my mother and my siblings was asking me what was going on. And then I told them. So, when Larry got hit Saturday, he didn't die initially. He ended up being taken to the hospital, but from his wounds, he ended up, transitioning while he was in the hospital. And it was pronounced on April 24th, 2005. Okay. So that's actually when, the brother Larry transitioned into the spiritual world, and we lost one of our soldiers, you know what I'm saying? We lost one of our soldiers, man. So now I want to tell you a little bit about the after effect of the situation. So, now Larry has passed on, you know what I'm saying? A bunch of chaos is going on. And with myself, I'm dealing with the juvenile judicial system in Clayton County. Because remember, I'm 15 years old. So these people talking about suspending and expelling me from school. They had charged me with assault and battery and disrupting, a public, disrupting the school. You know what I'm saying? So at the time, like, I was really dealing with being expelled from school and possibly doing juvenile jail time for assault and battery, because they thought that we actually cut the dude we was fighting in school, but we didn't. I just punched him. So it was just a lot going on, really, man, in my life. And when I was suspended from school, I remember I had one of the homies. He had that Tupac Resurrection DVD, and it had come out around that same time. And I remember I borrowed it from him, and I remember watching it, and just the Tupac's death. I was able to relate to it because the Larry situation had just happened. And it was just like, man, it just hit me hard, man. I ain't gonna lie to you. Like, I was taking the Tupac situation, a lot of stuff that my father used to talk to me about, and it was like it all just hit me at one time. And then I could just remember having a lot of questions about life and death, spirituality, the Bible, and just wanting to know a lot of higher answers in life. And this is when I was 15 years old. So all this stuff happened when I was 15 years old. And, the way I see my life is that it was everything that I had up until 15. And then at 15, that was like a change in my life, consciously and spiritually. And from 15 to the age I am now was like a whole nother chapter. But that's how I perceive my life. And the situation with Larry, it played a big part of that. You know what I'm saying? So, and as far as what was going on at school, after Larry's, untimely passing, a lot of people at Mondays Mill High School, they turned on us. A lot of rumors started surrounding Larry's death, and a lot of rumors started hitting the streets because people, creating conjecture and creating what they think happened and all this other type of stuff, and a lot of that started hitting the streets. Because you got to remember, like, I wasn't at the house party, but the house party did have a lot of students who went to Mondays Mill High School there. And there was a lot of people there, and some people may have saw what happened and some people didn't, but it was just a lot going on. And a lot of the rumors, a lot of it was not true, but only the people on the inside knew it at the time, because for a while, nobody was talking about it outside the crew. As a matter of fact, this tape that I'm making is the first time this has ever publicly been talked about. So none of those rumors were ever confirmed, but I know when I would hear certain stuff and I knew it wasn't true, I would just say in my mind, like, yeah, that didn't happen. But I just wouldn't really say nothing because I didn't really want to talk to nobody about it. And like I said, too, and then everybody at the school, they turned on me, man. Like, they looked at me like this bad guy. They looked at me as this, a dangerous type of figure. You know what I'm saying? And nobody really trusted me, as far as the students, and people just was kind of fearful even to be around me, man. I never forget when I first went back after being suspended from school, and I went to lunch, I remember, and nobody would sit by me. Everybody would like kind of move away to another table. And I remember even in class, like when I would go to homeroom and stuff like that, like nobody really wanted to sit around me. The only people that really was dealing with me were, like kind of the original crew people, a couple of miscellaneous folks I dealt with at the school. But a lot of the young women that I dealt with at the school, they kept dealing with me. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the young women, they kept dealing with me. I don't know what it was for, but I can also tell you this. There was also a lot of attention that was brought to me, that I deemed to be negative attention, because folks looking at you like, in other words, if people think you this scary street person, a lot of women are attracted to that. So I did notice a lot more female attention after that, but I wasn't fucking with it because at the end of the day, my homie just died. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't perceive it as like no badge of honor or nothing like that. It's like, Larry has passed on. You know what I'm saying? We still fucking here, but he's not. Ain't nothing good about this shit. So, and then also too, the enemies that we had that were from like that Homewood, Flint River, T-Road, Point South, and some of them are surrounding areas, Fairway Point, they consolidated and created a new identity post Larry's death. And they called their new identity MOB 23 Hard. Let me say that one more time. the niggas we was beefing with, they consolidated and created a new identity after Larry's death, and they called it MOB 23 Hard. And a lot of them began getting 23 Hard tattooed on their hands. And this mockery created much, much, much animosity and beef and conflicts with us. And that continued on into my 11th grade year. 2005, 2006, it continued on, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of the Southside Mafia and 220 guys, they piped up and turned up on them to a whole nother level, because even made me aware of it, back then, that these guys was making rap songs and diss songs, talking about you want to die like Larry and little shit like that, right? So from that point forward, I had a bad demonic negative energy towards them. And honestly, until I moved from the South Side, I told myself anytime I see any of them niggas, man, I'm at them, man. So I remember my whole 11th grade year, that's pretty much just what I was on. It was a lot of anger, and a lot of the people from the original crew and Amplitude of Mafia, we was in pain. So it was like, nah, we sliding for Larry. We looking for niggas, and you know what I'm saying? The shit just continued on, So that's what happened. And also, too, the Monday after Larry's death, so remember, we got in a fight in school on Friday. Saturday at school was the shootout. No, Saturday at the house party was a shootout. Sunday, Larry is pronounced deceased. So that Monday, when everybody's supposed to go back to school, which was the 25th, a lot of students were afraid there was going to be more retaliation at the school. So a lot of students, they stayed home. And when the staff recorded how many students were absent, it was 1,044 students. It was 1,044 students. So, Larry's death had a dramatic effect on my life, and it motivated me spiritually in a lot of ways. As I got older and I started doing my own research and investigation, I began seeing a lot of spiritual connections with this situation overall. For example, in the book of Revelations, there were 144,000 that were led into the kingdom of New Jerusalem. After the situation happened with Larry, there were 1,044, which is your 144, students who stayed home. So there were 144,000 entering the new kingdom in the book of Revelations. And there were 1,044 or 144 students who stayed home. So that 144 connection, that's when I realized, is this something with that number? Because what I can tell you is this: the Lord Almighty, the Most High God did not create the Larry situation. He did not cause Larry to die. But the Most High God did know that us being young men, we were going to make poor decisions and poor choices. And if we make those choices, then it's going to probably lead to a certain outcome. And after we made those poor choices and the things happened that were from behavior and actions we made, then I feel like the Most High God, the higher power Almighty, created a new path of healing for everyone involved in that to choose and take. So you could choose to take this new path of healing, or you can go deeper into the dark side and go deeper into the streets and become something that you're not supposed to become. And I'm gonna just be real with you. Me personally, I chose a higher path because I was just so disgusted by the fact that somebody that I used to kick it with all the time just wasn't here no more. And that shit is just like a surreal, creepy, eerie-like feeling. Even just sitting here looking at his picture right now and looking at his eyes, it just got a surreal, creepy feeling to it, man, because I'm still here to talk about this, but Larry is not. So I was like, man, you know what I'm saying? Like, I want to try to represent Larry in a better way. So at that age of 15, that's when I decided, man, let me really figure out this high school shit and finish. Let me go to college and graduate in that. You know what I'm saying? And these goals to be an entrepreneur and this and stuff. Let me see what that's about. Because maybe I can avenge Larry's death that way. Maybe I can take this story and this pain we had and this trauma and turn this into something creative that maybe it can impact the world on a bigger level that Larry will be proud of. You know what I'm saying? And I came to this realization when I was about 15, 16 years old. And I made the choice to go to the higher self versus the lower self. Now when it came to a lot of the other brothers that I was coming up with, everybody made their own choice. But what I can tell you is this: when it came to the Mafia and the Dub, they still was standing on business for Larry. They still was pulling up the Point South, giving them niggas hell. Like they didn't let up at all. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I'll always have respect and love for them, because, you know, I chose to heal and try to take Larry's situation and make something more positive out of it. And them, you know what I'm saying? You know, they were standing on business, you know, so I'll always salute and have love for them guys. The Mafia and 220, I'll always have love for them guys in my heart. So 18 years later, Amin and myself, we would end up creating the album From Pakistan to New Jerusalem. And this is where the Larry song is, you know what I'm saying? So so I just gave you the whole background story to the Larry song, you know, and why it happened and just some of the little basic details on it, man. But unfortunately, I can never bring Larry back, but I can do my best to keep his name alive and create positivity from this experience to influence the world in a favorable way. There is a Larry in every neighborhood of every black community in America. You know what I'm saying? And we could all learn something from this situation. So the only thing I can do is just hope that while Larry is resting in power and resting in peace, you know, if he ever was to spiritually peek back into this dimension, that he would be proud and he would be happy with what I'm doing by keeping his name alive and using this for positivity for other people through his story. You know what I'm saying? So this is the story of Larry, you know, the bishop of the 144,000. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to always love my nigga Larry. I'm going to always keep his name alive. Me and all the guys, we always going to keep Larry's name alive. And Larry going to be stamped in the culture. You know what I'm saying? Because Larry, you know, he just was a good guy. You know what I'm saying? And it was just a very, very unfortunate event. But this is a Green Box Politics episode. Stay tuned for the next one. Rest in peace to the brother Larry. We love you. I'm out.